After 3 days on the run, escaped convicts Ray and Mike felt desperate as they spotted an isolated cottage with a single flickering light. Inside, 78-year-old Martha Wilson sat alone, savoring the serenity of her home while knitting. The criminals burst through her back door, demanding valuables from the trembling elderly woman. She let them take whatever they wanted. However, when one of them grabbed her late husband's jewelry box, the fragile old woman's demeanor shifted into something that made both hardened criminals freeze. The night enveloped the countryside in an unusual darkness. Not even moonlight penetrated the thick cloud cover as two men stumbled through the dense woods. Their prison uniforms were caked with mud, their faces gaunt from days on the run. Ray and Mike had escaped from Westfield Correctional Facility 3 days earlier. What had seemed like a brilliant plan now felt like a desperate gamble as hunger gnawed at their stomachs and fatigue weighed down their limbs. The bitter autumn wind cut through their thin garments, making Mike shiver uncontrollably. They needed shelter, food, and better clothing if they hoped to make it to the state border. The authorities were certainly looking for them by now, their descriptions broadcast across every police channel in the region. Ray paused at the edge of a small clearing, raising his hand to halt his companion. Through the trees, approximately 50 yards away, stood a small cottage. A single light glowed from one of the windows, casting a faint yellow rectangle onto the leaf-strewn ground outside. Inside the cottage, 78-year-old Martha Wilson sat in her favorite armchair, knitting a scarf for her grandson's upcoming birthday. Her fingers moved rhythmically, despite the arthritis that caused her joints to swell and ache. The condition had worsened over the past year, making everyday tasks increasingly difficult. In the corner of the room, a rolled-up exercise mat leaned against the wall. An odd item, perhaps, for an elderly woman with mobility issues, but Martha had her reasons for keeping it there. Her children had been pleading with her to sell the cottage and move closer to them in the city. They worried about her living alone so far from help if something were to happen. But Martha had always firmly refused. This place had been her home for over 50 years, filled with memories of her late husband James and the life they had built together. The shattering of glass cut through the silence like a knife. Martha's hands froze mid-stitch, her heart instantly racing. Carefully, she set down her knitting and reached for her walker, positioned beside her chair. Her hip surgery from 6 months ago made standing without assistance nearly impossible. She had barely gotten to her feet when the back door burst open. Two men rushed in, their faces partially covered with makeshift masks created from torn pieces of cloth. Their eyes darted around the room, taking in the modest furnishings and finally the elderly woman standing there with her walker. The taller of the two men stepped forward. Ray assessed the situation quickly, noting with satisfaction the fear evident in the old woman's eyes. This would be easy. The cottage was isolated and its sole occupant posed no threat. Ray approached Martha, who gripped her walker tightly, her knuckles white from the pressure. His voice came out in a low, threatening growl as he instructed her not to make any noise. He explained that they only needed food and whatever cash she had, then they would be gone. Martha's voice shook as she responded, clearly terrified. She told them to take whatever they needed, pleading with them not to hurt her. Her eyes darted nervously around the room, as though looking for an escape route that didn't exist. Mike wasted no time in heading to the kitchen, ransacking cupboards and drawers in search of anything edible. Ray kept his attention on Martha, who remained by her chair, leaning heavily on her walker. Losing patience, Ray demanded to know where she kept her purse. With a trembling hand, Martha indicated a small side table near the entrance to the hallway. Disappointment was evident on Mike's face as he returned from the kitchen and reported the meager findings. Ray rummaged through Martha's purse, finding only $37 and some change. Mike's gaze wandered around the room, searching for anything of value. His attention caught on a wooden box sitting on the mantelpiece. He moved toward it with purpose. The box was beautifully crafted, its lid inlaid with a pattern of oak leaves. Inside were several pieces of jewelry, including a wedding band, a silver watch, and a set of cufflinks. Nothing exceptionally valuable to a pawn shop, but these items clearly held sentimental importance. As Mike lifted a gold pocket watch from the box, something unexpected happened. Martha's demeanor transformed completely. Her voice, which had been quavering with fear moments ago, suddenly became firm and commanding as she ordered him to put the box down, explaining that those items weren't his to touch. The change was so abrupt that both men paused momentarily. Then Ray laughed, asking what an old woman like her thought she could possibly do about it. He moved toward her with clear intimidation in his stance, telling her to sit down before she got hurt. When Ray reached out to push Martha back into her chair, something remarkable occurred. Her hand shot to her walker's handle, and with a swift, practiced motion, twisted and pulled. The handle detached from the frame, revealing itself to be a disguised tactical baton, its metal surface gleaming in the lamplight. Before Ray could process what was happening, Martha struck his wrist with precise force and expertise. The cracking sound was followed immediately by his howl of pain. Martha moved away from the walker entirely, suddenly displaying mobility that contradicted her earlier difficulty. Mike lunged forward, but Martha sidestepped with unexpected agility, delivering a calculated strike to his knee that sent him crashing to the floor. Years of specialized training became evident in every controlled movement as Martha positioned herself strategically between the two intruders. Ray attempted to rush her from behind, but Martha anticipated the move. With fluid motion that belied her age, she executed a perfectly timed defensive maneuver that sent Ray tumbling through her glass coffee table. Both men stared up at the elderly woman in shock and confusion. Martha stood over them, her posture now straight and confident, the tactical baton held with practiced ease in her right hand. Martha informed them calmly that they had chosen the wrong house to invade. What were the chances that these escaped convicts would target the home of a former combat instructor with 25 years of service in the United States Marine Corps? The revelation hit the intruders like a physical blow. This was no helpless old lady. This was a trained military veteran who, despite age and physical ailments, retained the muscle memory and skills from decades of combat training. Terror replaced aggression in the eyes of both men as they scrambled to their feet. They practically climbed over each other in their haste to escape through the same door they had so confidently entered minutes earlier. Their frantic escape led them directly into the path of a police search team combing the woods for the escaped convicts. Officers had been tracking their movement through the forest and had set up a perimeter around the area. Within minutes, Ray and Mike found themselves face down on the ground, hands cuffed behind their backs, their brief taste of freedom officially over. Inside the cottage, Martha carefully reassembled her tactical walking cane. The adrenaline that had carried her through the confrontation began to subside, allowing the familiar pain to creep back into her joints. She grimaced as she reached for the phone to call both the police and her son. The next day, Martha's children renewed their pleas for her to move to the city where they could keep a closer eye on her. Martha declined once again, explaining that she was perfectly capable of handling herself. Looking at the broken coffee table and remembering the previous night's events, none of her children could find a convincing argument to the contrary. What would you do if someone broke into your home? Would you fight back like Martha, or do you have a different plan to protect yourself and your loved ones?